Hey guys, what's happening? Nihat here with Film Comics Explained, and today we'll be doing a breakdown of The Babadook, which was written and directed by Jennifer Kent, starring Essie Davis and Noah Wiseman as a mother and son haunted by a malevolent spirit bent on their demise. Drawing inspiration from a variety of older horror films like The Shining, Vampire, Nosferatu, Halloween, and The Thing, the film follows Amelia Vanek as she attempts to move on with her life after the death of her husband Oscar, who'd passed away in a car accident 6 years earlier, driving her to the hospital on the day that she would give birth to their son Samuel. With an out-of-control son that she found impossible to love and his frequent dreams about a monster that was coming to kill them both, Amelia begins to lose her patience and the capacity to take care of him. The arrival of a disturbing book called Mr. Babadook at their home convinces Samuel that the creature in the book was the very monster that he'd been dreaming about, and as his hallucinations spiral further out of control, he becomes more unpredictable and even violent, causing Amelia to become frightened of her son. It's not until she begins to see glimpses of the sinister presence depicted in the book around their home that she begins to realize that his hallucinations may have been based in reality. After sending a letter to the visionary and controversial Danish filmmaker Lars von Trier and being accepted to assist him on the set of his film Dogville, the up-and-coming writer and director began to formulate her filmmaking process that included the exploration of existentialism, societal issues, and mental health. This would manifest into her first film venture with her black and white short film Monster in 2005, which was about a mother battling with her son's fear of a monster lurking in the closet. While initially passing it off as a rational childhood fear of the dark, she soon discovers the presence of a malevolent being in their home that sought the boy. The fantastic short would of course be the seed for the feature film The Babadook, but whereas the short film doesn't have enough time to delve into the complicated reason the monster was in their home, or what it even was, the feature explores this in greater detail and is more of a psychological horror than a monster flick. If you haven't already seen her short film, it's actually available on YouTube, and I recommend that you guys check it out if you want to see how it all began. Much like the Babadook monster that appears in the surreal pop-up book, the world of the film itself is a depiction of Amelia's life through a heightened reality lens, with everything we see from the family home, the numerous characters, to the major events being served up as an expressionistic portrayal of the inner turmoil and confluence of emotions Amelia felt. The film at its core is about grief and the problems associated with not dealing with it in a healthy way, eventually manifesting into the otherworldly Babadook monster that encapsulated an outward expression of the 5 stages of grieving. The film begins with the inciting incident upon which the entire story revolves around, which was a car crash that took away the life of Amelia's husband Oscar. Her inability to acknowledge, let alone deal with this traumatic event, creates more problems for her, especially with regards to her relationship with her 6-year-old son Samuel. Unable to emotionally separate Samuel from the death of her husband, this makes it difficult for her to love him, which in turn causes Sam to lash out and misbehave.
It doesn't work if you don't look at me.
Don't do that!
Not only does she avoid the topic of her late husband when it's brought up by her sister Claire, who was aggravated by the state of denial Amelia chooses to live in, but it's also revealed that Samuel was yet to have a birthday of his own on the actual date of his birth, with Claire and Amelia always hosting a joint birthday party for Samuel and his cousin Ruby. Obsessed with monsters and plagued by frequent nightmares in the middle of the night, the budding magician uses his inventive savvy to concoct a number of anti-monster devices to protect him and his mother from the things that frightened him, much to his mother's dismay.
What have you done?
It's not broken, it just slipped.
Don't want you firing things off in the house anymore.
Wait, watch this. When the monster comes, I'm gonna do this.
Please don't!
Much of the film's genius is the way it portrays Sam as a problem child that was driving his mother to insanity, when in actuality, it was his mother's choices that were causing all of their troubles. This is flipped by the end when it's actually Sam who saves the day, using the very weapons he'd created to defend them. Further driving a wedge between them, Sam gets suspended from school, with his teachers worrying that he was a threat to the other students. Amelia's annoyance at the boy is then aggravated by his insistence on telling strangers that his father had died driving his mum to the hospital to give birth to him. While this does get on her nerves for obvious reasons, we later find out that his outgoing and confident nature mirrored that of his father, which created more animosity towards him from Amelia, who was yet to deal with his passing. I also think it's important to note that her conflicting emotions and repressed feelings are what created the Babadook itself, as well as the doorway through which it would enter their lives. Following their nightly routine of Amelia checking under his bed and within his closet for monsters, she let Sam pick a book for her to read to him. Reaching into the shelf, the boy pulls out a story called Mr. Babadook that appeared to have come out of nowhere. But after going through a few pages of the disturbing book, which stated that they were going to wish that they were dead after seeing him in their room at night, Amelia closed the book in shock as Sam began to scream in fear. This only intensifies Sam's fears as he begins to hear what he thought was the Babadook within his room, causing him to run to his mother and beg to stay with her. Now, Amelia flicks through more of the pages later in the evening, trying to find out more information, and discovers that the story was unfinished, appearing to have no author or publishing details on the front or back. The reason for this was because the book was a manifestation of grief and would only reveal more pages once she'd begun to go through the stages of grief, something that she'd avoided for many years. Since the boy was now suspended from school, Amelia leaves Sam with her sister Claire while she went to work at a nursing home. Seeing that she was clearly exhausted, her co-worker tells her to go home and take the afternoon off, and instead of going to pick Sam up, she indulges herself by going to the mall and eating ice cream, in probably the only time she's had to herself in years. This entire sequence is almost dreamlike, with most of it out of focus, and the blur serving as an expression of her physical and mental degradation. When she snaps out of this temporary fantasy, she looks at her phone and sees that she had a number of missed calls from her sister, who was struggling to take care of Sam. She then arrives at Claire's and discovers that he'd been frightening Ruby with stories of the Babadook. When Amelia states that if the monster was real, they would have seen him already, Sam quotes the book with a passage that said that he wanted to scare you before showing up to eat you, causing her to cancel his birthday for the year, along with chances of getting presents or even a birthday cake. The boy then goes into the basement where his father's possessions had been boxed up and takes everything out, creating a fantasy world where he could communicate with Oscar. After telling his father that he would protect his mother from the monster, Amelia overhears him and admonishes Sam for pulling his father's things out of the storage containers they were in and tells him that he wasn't allowed to be in there. The basement is a literal and metaphorical representation of her inability to confront her emotions and grief, with Amelia choosing to instead lock them out of sight. It's very clear that she herself has avoided not only going down into the basement for some time, but that she'd also not seen a photo of her husband in years. With the door to her grief being metaphorically opened for the first time, her repressed feelings begin to unravel, sending her down a rabbit hole. With strange things beginning to happen in the home, from the flickering of lights, the passing of mysterious shadows, to the collapse of Sam's cupboard, which the boy was not strong enough to topple on his own, Amelia begins to become more unnerved, leading her to tear out the pages of the book before burning it. This, however, does nothing to stop the Babadook, which had already been let into their lives, and we see it creep into their home and torment them, beginning with 3 knocks on the door, Amelia seeing its shape in a number of places, and then progressing to her first encounter with the spirit over the phone when it calls to make its presence known. This all coalesces into her possession, with the Babadook entering her room and taking hold of her. To make matters worse, she finds the book on her front doorstep, a day after she had set it alight. Only this time, there were more pages showing the mother killing the family dog before strangling the boy in the storybook, alluding to the reality of the situation that was about to unfold. As a result of this, her behaviour starts to drastically change. While in the past she would merely hide her contempt for Sam when he was acting out, she no longer contains it and even lashes out at the boy for asking for some food as their fridge was empty. She also screams in the same pattern that the Babadook used in the book and tells him that if he was hungry, that he should go and eat crap. This is of course due to her being consumed by the grief that she had buried, which was now finally manifesting itself as the Babadook. I think it's also important to note the dynamic of their relationship had also completely changed, as whereas she was frightened of him at the start of the film, Sam was now terrified of his mother, even cowering in the corner as she attempted to apologize. Amelia then spirals out of control, from seeing the Babadook in the rearview mirror of her car, causing her to crash into another vehicle, jumping into the bath fully clothed, to sleeping with her late husband's violin. All indications that Amelia was going through the stages of grieving that she had avoided for many years. But when Sam calls her elderly neighbour for help, she takes the phone away from him and assures her that everything was fine before disassembling the phone and using a knife to cut the phone lines. She then went on to lock all the doors and windows and retired to the living room, where she would see a hallucination of her son dead beside her. This is continued with a news report about a mother that killed her son and was shot by police, but when Amelia looks closer at the house on the television, she sees herself in the window, eerily smiling back. This is then interrupted by a hallucination of her son sleepwalking down into the basement. When she goes after him, she finds the Babadook appearing as her late husband, asking her for the child in order for them to be together again. Though she rejects the proposal at first, the Babadook stalks her throughout the house and digs his claws into her, indicating that he had now fully possessed her. Now completely overcome with grief and not thinking clearly, she starts following the directions set out in the book by first killing the family dog before going after Sam under the guise of an apology and acknowledgement that she was aware she was sick. Luckily, the terrified Sam manages to stab her in the leg with a knife in self-defense and uses all of the weapons he had prepared to confront the monster against her, and even manages to tie her up. In a heartwarming scene, Sam tells Amelia that he wasn't going to leave her and brings up the fact that she didn't love him because the Babadook wouldn't let her, before stating that he loved her regardless of how she felt. While in the mind of the innocent Sam, he was referring to the monster, this was a meta reference to the grief that was preventing her from having a normal relationship with her son. Though a struggle ensues between Amelia and the Babadook within her, she ultimately defeats it by confronting it head-on and telling the beast that it was trespassing. After threatening to kill the monster if it dared to touch her son again, the defeated Babadook collapses on the ground before making its way to the basement. The film then skips to Sam's birthday, where we find out that he was having his first birthday party on the actual day, symbolizing Amelia's acceptance that while this was a day of grief, it was also a day to be celebrated. She then goes into the basement with a bowl filled with worms, and while the Babadook attempts to knock her over, she stands her ground and tells the monster it was alright. She then leaves the bowl on the ground and we see it getting pulled away. This was a representation of how, by the very nature of grief, it would never fully go away, but if dealt with in a healthy manner, the pain would become less overwhelming over time. Well, that's all for today, folks. A big thanks to all of you guys who requested an explanation of the Babadook. Don't forget to hit subscribe and click the notification icon to stay up to date on all my content, and if there's anything else you'd like to request, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Nihat here with Film and Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.
I thought you were